fostering or whether it's more broadly in a sort of a charitable giving kind of context. There's a couple different things for each of those that you want to keep in mind. So that is the main focus of our topic today. And then, our document that we have for you, if you're joining via Zoom, is our document finder. And that is an incredibly important tool in general in estate planning, but in particular, if you're looking to plan to adopt any of your foster children, because people are going to need access to these documents, especially after the adoption occurs. This is where people are going to find out who's in charge of your planning at that point, or who is set to be the personal representative for an estate. If you have any powers of attorney adopted or powers of attorney that you have drafted, that's a good place to, write down where you're keeping those. So again, thank you everybody for joining me today for our topic on foster families and estate planning in that context. So again, if you are participating via Zoom, you can, there's a Q&A function. So if you have any questions that are coming up as we're talking through things today, please feel free to submit the question on that Q&A in that Q&A box, and I'll be able to answer that question as it pops up. There's sort of two main contexts, or I guess topics of discussion that we're having today. Focusing this on one on more sort of charitable giving on the foster family side of things. There are organizations you can give money to and how you might best do that, or maybe setting up funds through a community organization for foster families. That is one sort of side of this, but there's also the side of it where you're looking at maybe fostering to adopt, which is a not at all uncommon thing that foster families try to engage in on their, if they have kind of long-standing foster children. So this is something that there's a couple of ways that you would want to incorporate, either of those two things. So I'll start with the sort of charitable side of things, because that's really, that kind of plays into probably a broader, I guess, audience and what they may be trying to do with their estate planning. So whenever you're giving anything to charity in general, quite frankly, there's proper ways to do it through estate planning. There's more tax efficient ways to do it through estate planning. There's a lot of considerations with that. So, you want to be able to direct those funds properly, and you don't want to necessarily leave it up to just kind of whoever the administrator is of the estate. You want to be very intentional about setting that up in advance. So there's a lot of organizations out there, like community foundations, for example, where you can set aside funds for specific purposes, right? And so you can set aside certain percentages of your estate that you might leave to these organizations for that specific purpose of maybe supporting foster care, or maybe like an education fund for foster children, right? If you don't want to set up your own, there's also the possibility of leaving money to a fund that already exists. So you don't have to necessarily create your own foundation or your own endowment fund or anything like that. You can set these up or leave designations to certain organizations that may already exist, especially if they align with your goals when it comes to that charitable giving. So first, starting with kind of tax efficient things. One of the things that you want to look at when you're talking about charitable giving in general is leaving that money in the most tax efficient way, especially if you have charitable and non-charitable beneficiaries. If it's all charitable, that doesn't matter as much. You can leave 100% to that charity, and that's going to be just as tax efficient as anything else. But if you do have non-charitable beneficiaries on top of that, maybe that foster child fund that you might be leaving things to, there's ways that you're going to want to work with a financial planner and your estate planning attorney to designate those, funds properly in a tax efficient way. Particularly if there's anything with like built-in taxes, things like IRAs, pre-tax IRAs in particular, 401ks, non-Roth IRAs or 401ks. If there's taxes that still have to be paid on it, if you have an individual beneficiary and you have a charitable beneficiary, the way properly plan is try to satisfy that charitable bequest that you have with the pre-tax money. Remember that charities, 501c3 organizations, don't pay income tax on things like that. So if you want to maximize the value of your estate and you have a charitable and non-charitable side of it, the way to maximize that is to try to leave the post-tax funds to the non-charitable side, or things that the individual beneficiaries are not going to have to pay any sort of income tax on. If possible, it maximizes the value to them, but then also maximizes the value of your estate to that charity, because you're giving the taxable account to the charity, and since they don't pay taxes on it, you're maximizing its value. No tax will ever come out of that. So there's a number of ways that I mentioned that you can do this. One of which is, there's community foundations out there that are able to sort of direct your funds and try to keep that fund going after you're gone. You work with them to, set up the types of causes that you are important to you. And if, for example, any sort of foster family fund is already existing, you can leave money to that. But if it doesn't quite meet what you might want out of a fund, you can set up your own through a community foundation. You can have them continue to invest the funds that you leave to them in those types of causes. So that's a really good option if the charitable side of things is more where you're looking at, foster family type, inclusion in your estate plan. When we're talking more about maybe your own foster children that you want to provide for, or if you are fostering to adopt, I'll start with kind of the before the adoption actually occurs, because this may happen for a lot of people, or maybe they're not planning to adopt, but do want to provide for some of the foster children that they've had over the years. There's various types of mechanisms that you can use through an estate plan to continue to provide for them. So for example, if you have foster children that you want to provide for their specific education, those are provisions that you're going to want to put into either your will plan or your trust plan, depending on your estate planning documents, to set up for that, for that specific use for them, or for their ongoing care. If something were to happen to you and you want to continue to economically provide for them after you're gone. If you have gone through with the adoption process, a really important thing to remember at that point is, now that you are the legal parent and guardian, you also have to account for what happens if you are no longer around to be that guardian. If you pass away, as with any minor children, you have to name guardians in your will, or I should say in your will, to provide for the court's sort of designation of, okay, here's who's going to take over for me if I no longer am around to care for this child, especially after that adoption has occurred. This wouldn't necessarily be something you do beforehand, because you are not, when a child is in the foster system like that, you are not able to designate those sort of backups in that instance, but you can designate backup guardians after you have legally adopted somebody, if they're a minor, or if they are under court-ordered guardianship for other purposes, like if they have a disability for some reason, they no longer can be their own, be in charge of their own finances or their own health, depending on the circumstances. So the document that we have for you today, if you've registered in advance, is what we call our document finder. And this is a really helpful tool for anybody really, but in particular, if you have children that you've adopted and you want to make sure that your wishes are honored here, because you have, you want to keep these documents, and by these documents, I mean kind of the broader estate planning documents, you want to keep them somewhere where people have access to them, and the people who you've nominated in your plan, to be the personal representative or to be the next contingent guardians for your children. You want to make sure that they know where these are. In particular with wills, you can only have one valid original for a will. You can't have a dozen copies that are all valid wills. So if you have that will in a place for safekeeping, you want somebody to be able to find it. Because if they can't find it, it may mean that your wishes are not honored either as quickly as they would have been otherwise, or possibly not at all if they can never find anything related to your wishes in that will. So the document finder is a really good tool. It's not a legal document in any way, but it is a good tool for you to use if you're trying to, direct people for looking for these documents if something happens to you. I always tell people you don't want to keep these in places that are, overly hidden or, impossible to access. I mean, there's sensitive information in them, sure. Your wishes are personal and that is private information. But if nobody can find these documents, that's difficult as well. Did I hear? Oh, looks like Sarah Kahns, another attorney in our office, has just hopped on. So Sarah, I just talked a little bit about the sort of charitable side of things and had started talking about the more fostering to adopt. I don't know if you have anything to add to the charitable side of things.
Well, as I think every person in my life has ever told me, I always have something to add. Whether or not it's always useful, I think, is in the eye of the beholder. Sorry for the delay. I was having a few technical issues and trying to get on. Technology is always great when it works, right?
Oh, of course.
So I'm glad that everybody had a chance to go through the document finder. I don't think people realize how much stress that can put on a family member when they can't find some of the basic things that they need in order to provide that type of assistance. So it's good that through the taking of this presentation, you guys have access to this because it does provide that assistance. So when it comes to fostering, there are so many different things that you can do and so many different questions because there's so many different ways you can go. And all of it depends on you, really. Is this a situation where you're fostering to adopt? So you're looking to hopefully adopt a child through this process. Are you more in a situation where you foster children on a regular basis, but in some cases you foster until they reach adulthood, but you don't adopt? And so it really depends on not only your situation, but also on what you expect to happen or what your intentions are. Are you looking to plan for a particular child, or are you looking to plan for a group of children? Do you have a particular child in mind, or is it also for future children? If one of the things that you do is foster children on an ongoing basis, you may be looking to provide for various needs that other children might have that you may foster in the future. So it may be a bigger commitment that you're looking to make to a larger group of people. So it's so situation specific as to what road or what path you're going down. And there's the personal side of this as well. If there was a particular item of personal property that really meant something to a child, that they learned to play the piano by you, or that there was something that inspired them to pursue a certain career path or a certain talent, or just something that connected you to them in a particular way. Making sure to account for that in your planning so that hopefully that item ends up in their hands if that's what your intention is. This is all about making your intentions very specific and known to whether you're using a will or a trust or some sort of estate plan, that you're making your intentions known and that they're very clear. So it's just a set of instructions that are being followed. If you're fostering to adopt, you're also trying to account for a variety of different scenarios and different steps in this process that may happen or may not happen. And depending on what has happened, which path are you going to be going down? And yes, it is absolutely necessary to update your plan as your circumstances change. That's an important component. I tell all of my clients, usually at the very beginning of any consultation I have, in order to become a client of mine, you have to agree to one thing, and that is coming back to see me at least every 5 years. I need to be able to have a conversation with you to make sure that the goals and intentions and the situations of the people that you care about still match what it is that we've done for planning for you. And it's impossible to happen if we haven't had some sort of interaction or conversation, at least every 5 years. I've got clients that come back more regularly than that, and I also have clients who don't necessarily always follow the 5-year rule, but I try to get that commitment from everybody. And it's especially important in situations like these. But you want to come back even sooner if you've had a significant change in circumstances, and something like being able to adopt would definitely be one of them, because now a foster child has become your child, your legal child. And so you can plan for them in a much more specific way at this point. But the fear is that there's going to be something that happens in between when you're fostering and when you adopt, where you don't get the opportunity to make those changes because, you know, maybe you didn't get around to it. Maybe you intended to do it. It was on that list of things to do, but somehow you did the original plan when the kids were minors, and now you've hit retirement. So now you decided that it's time to update your plan. So, I mean, that's very, very common in our industry, that the last plan that was done was when the kids were minors, and now the kids have grown children of their own, and their own children are retired. And at that point, that's when we're first updating the plan. So it's important to be reviewing the plan and updating it. It's especially important in situations like this, where changes in circumstances can have a very big impact on what you're able to do. So with a fostering to adopt scenario, you want to plan for if the child is still a foster child at the time that the person that they are with has passed away. What happens if the person becomes incapacitated? There's a lot that is governed by the county and the state when the child is still a foster child. So there are a lot of things that you can't decide. There are, you know, the child is in your care as a foster parent, but there are a lot of things that you're not allowed to make decisions about either. When they become a child of yours after adoption, that changes substantially, and you have the ability to make certain decisions. So things like a parental power of attorney, which is the ability to name a person to make decisions on behalf of your child if you are like going out of town. So if you go on a trip somewhere or on a cruise, or if you get stranded in Guatemala because COVID and you're there for 3 months, making sure that you have somebody that can make decisions on behalf of your child. Parental power of attorney is what that is. Wisconsin has that. Doing recommendations to the court on what guardian you would choose. That's something that you can do when the child is yours. With foster children, it doesn't work that way. They're still considered to be under the responsibility of the Department of Human Services under the state. So they're making decisions about what happens at that point. And it's not up to you as to where they may be placed if something happens to you. But that doesn't mean that you cannot provide for something for them. And it doesn't mean that you can't support something about them. It doesn't mean that you need to put it in the hands of the department or the hands of the state or anything like that. You can decide who it is that's in control of that, and you can benefit that. Like, for example, if there was some sort of educational pursuit that they really enjoyed, or there was I had a situation where there was a particular summer camp that was really important to a child, and that being a component of their regular routine during the summer, they look forward to it all year round. So making sure that continued to be a something that they could count on. You can do that as part of your estate plan without it being considered, without necessarily having it just turning it over to somebody else. You can still keep it in the control of the people that you trust, your family members, the individuals in your life that you trust to handle your affairs, but you can still support various individuals, including foster children, in ways that you would like to. You can also benefit foster children as a whole. So if that becomes a priority, if you'd like, there are established foundations out there that provide scholarships and various benefits and services for children that have gone through the foster system to help them get ahead in life and help them pursue educational goals or establish businesses. So there are already things out there like that you can allocate resources to. So nonprofit organizations that you can donate to. You can set up your own fund. I've definitely helped clients establish different types of funds. You can use the local community foundation to set up things like scholarship funds and have certain types of things that allow the person to qualify. So if one of the things you want to do is make sure that foster kids have the ability to access educational resources or scholarship funds, that might be something that you want to make as part of your estate plan. That it isn't one particular child or a group of children that you have a personal connection with. It's a sort of the group as a whole. There's also things that you can do when it comes to not necessarily establishing nonprofit organizations, but allocating funds for certain pursuits or certain priorities, depending on what it is that was important during your life. So, these are all different types of directions that you can go, or you can do multiples of these. You don't have to pick just one path. You can absolutely pick more than one. It just depends on what your situation is, and not only what your situation is now, but what you expect it to be in the future, and then what it actually is in the future, because sometimes expectations and reality are two very different things. So creating a plan that allows for, if this happens, then if we're in this situation, then this is what we do. If this is not our situation, then this is what the plan is going to be. And if this is not the situation, then this is what the plan is going to be. And you also have people in positions of decision-making authority that you trust, whose judgment you trust, and who you've talked to. So they know how you feel about certain things, how you feel about different organizations, or how you feel about charitable contributions. You also have to remember sometimes charities disappear, that they no longer exist by the time you're ready to donate to them. Some have successors in interest, so they name charities to receive after them, but you might want to have provisions in there that allow the people that you trust, that you've put into these positions of decision making, to select a different charity that you know would be one that you would support. But you have to be clear about that. There's also tax planning that goes into this, so that you're maximizing the value and the utility of the estate that you're able to leave. The size of your estate doesn't matter. It's what you want to do with it that matters. This is everything that you've accumulated over your entire life, and all the people in your life that matter the most to you. Making sure to be intentional about what it is that you're doing and being clear about it, whether it's, I want this particular cookbook to go to this person, or this photo to go to this person, or I want to establish a scholarship fund, or I want to donate to the community foundation, or I want to make sure that if we've been able to adopt this child, that they're inheriting the balance of our estate, but it's under somebody else's authority until they're at least 30 or 40, because somebody can't go from 18 and I have $1,000 in my checking account and that's the most money I've ever had, to being able to, no matter how smart you are, it's not intelligence that dictates whether or not you're capable of managing money. It's experience and practice. It's just like anything else. If you've never done it before, you're probably not going to be great at it the first time you try. So making sure that you're putting people in place that can help and can guide, and they're people that you trust and that you've had conversations with. So these are all important to consider and to really think about what it is that you want to do. I don't know if you have anything to add, Justin. I think I've been monopolizing some of the time here. I apologize. I'm starting to turn into Peter.
Oh, it's okay. No, I mean, I certainly agree with everything you said, and on, in particular with the sort of maximizing the value of what you're leaving behind. I mean, it's important, I think, to take a look, if you don't already have an advisor, a financial advisor, to work with a financial advisor as well as an estate planning attorney on this, to make sure that you're allocating the funds in a way that, like Sarah mentioned, to maximize the value. In particular, in an example where you might want to leave some both to a fund that is specifically more sort of charitably inclined towards like foster children in general, or specific sort of education programs for foster children, versus maybe specific foster children that you may have fostered or actually adopted at some point, to work with which funds should go into sort of which direction, and make sure that those are set up the best way they can be, so that you're not only making sure that the charities get the most out of what they're getting, but also that the fund that you may be leaving for your own foster children, that you are making sure they don't necessarily have a whole lot of built-in taxes that they might have to be worried about with these funds, or any of those sorts of things. And then also working with, like Sarah mentioned, setting up those, working with somebody to set up maybe a kind of a manager of that fund for them. Maybe it's a professional trustee, maybe it's somebody that you are very close with, that is very good at managing sort of financial decision making, and may have a relationship with those foster children that you've had. I mean, those are all sorts of things that you need to factor into this before before you really set all this in stone, because these are not things that you want to leave up to chance necessarily. So, anything to add on top of that?
Nope, I think intentions and being intentional is probably the main takeaway here.
Yeah.
And it's kind of circling around and going back to the document finder is probably a good point to leave everyone with, making sure that people know where to find things. I mean, no matter how great of a plan you have, if people don't know that you have one or where it is, it can't be used. So making sure that you have outlined where things are so people can find them and use them, and that the advisors, the professionals that they've worked with, that they know who they are. I have a lot of conversations with families with the idea of doing family meetings, so that we can manage expectations. We talk about roles and responsibilities. Maybe we don't talk about money if that isn't something that they're ready to talk about as a family yet. But we talk about who's going to be doing what, so it isn't a surprise. And the person that they're putting in this role, they're ready for that responsibility, and they know me. They're much more likely to call me if they've interacted with me at some point, if they've seen me. And I'm not just, some business card they find in a binder somewhere. And they're not going to hesitate to reach out for help and to get that help, because they've been able to both find the information and they've had those interactions. And that goes with other advisors as well. You really want sort of the teamwork. So if something happens and you are putting different people in charge of different things, that you're able to work together and they have the support that they need to do a good job for you. Another quote in our office often is, people can't do a good job if they don't know that they have a job to do. So family meetings, making sure to manage expectations, informing people of what it is that you either intend to do, or the fact that you have a plan, even if you're not ready to discuss the details of it. Making sure that those things are known and who that they can contact is important. So document finder can be very helpful for all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like we're pretty close to time here, but just to let you guys know what our upcoming topic is next week is actually, we're talking about planning for what we call up north properties, but in reality, it could be anywhere that you own sort of a vacation cottage, lake home, hunting land, anything like that with your family members. There's particular planning that you need to do to make sure that the next generation has the right structure to deal with these properties if you intend for it to go to multiple owners, or in particular, if you already own it with multiple owners, making sure that that next generation isn't sort of set up to not deal with things like expenses or what happens if somebody wants to sell their interest, for example. So that's our topic next week. We're coming up on summer here, so that's maybe a good time to start talking about family cabins and all of that. And just one last reminder, if you did sign up ahead of time for this webinar, you'll get an email with the feedback form at the end or sometime today. And if you would like to set up an initial consultation with us, there's a place for you to fill that out there, or you can give us a call at any time too. Those are set up for usually around 2 hours. Sometimes they take a little longer, sometimes a little less. But they are complimentary. So we can't really know what we would recommend for somebody without spending time talking to them. So that's why we want to be able to have those conversations without any sort of fear of people worrying about what it's going to cost them to have that discussion. So, if it is
we don't charge for them.
Yeah.
For anybody that's grown up in Wisconsin, all vacation property, hunting land, everything, cabin, cottage, everything is up north. It doesn't matter where it is, it's up north, somewhere up north. Even if you're going west or east, it's up north. And I did learn a couple years ago, I didn't know that there was an actual definition for this, but there is a difference between a cottage and a cabin. A cabin is a structure in the woods, and a cottage is a structure on the water. So there are specific definitions for different types of structures in, apparently, I don't know if this is in Wisconsin specifically. All I know is it's all up north. That's what I learned up in Wisconsin anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, and if you didn't have a chance to ask any questions, or you think of questions later, that's a really good time, or a good use of those initial consultations too, to kind of figure out what you might need in terms of assistance with any of these sort of things, or just maybe estate planning in general. Maybe, you're focused on the foster side of things now, but are just also looking for general advice. I mean, that's what those initial consultations are for. So please feel free to join us next week for our up north discussion, because it's a very popular one generally. And a lot of people in Wisconsin, like Sarah said, somebody knows somebody at least who has up north property, whether they own it themselves or not. So it's going to be a really interesting one. And otherwise, we won't keep you too long here, but thanks for joining us. And we hope to see you guys next week.